Hello, I'm Superintendent David Brown with the Chicago Police Department, and I'm here with Alexa James. Alexa, do you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah, of course. Alexa James, CEO of NAMI Chicago, and overall supporter of the wellness of this wonderful police department.
We are maskless, but we both have had both doses of the vaccine, and there has been 14 days in between the time we've had our second dose, so we're safe to be this close distance without the mask. So Alexa, you're formally coming on board as my senior advisor on officer wellness.
Yeah.
Kind of a first in class time it's happened in this department. Just let us know, I know we're excited, just let us know kind of your level of excitement about this new journey of yours.
Yeah, thank you for letting me say that actually, because no one's asked me that yet. And I was telling my sister last night that this is the privilege of my career, honestly. I have loved this department for over a decade. I have watched resilience. I have watched people do amazing things. We have watched in this training, and we've seen also what happens when we are hurt and when we are misunderstood and not heard. And so I think that the knowledge that we can bring as an organization hopefully will be incredibly helpful. And so for you to trust in me and for the department to trust in me, how I can seek better information to help healing, I'm tremendously honored, particularly now.
We've had recently our third suicide since I've been superintendent now in the past 11 months, which is one too many, but that's obviously very concerning and very tragic for our department. But on a larger extent, the profession, not just Chicago Police Department, the profession struggles with talking about mental health, talking about officer suicides. Just what's your overall take from a high level about this profession and Chicago PD's struggle with suicides?
I mean, my voice cracks every time because I do feel like a significant responsibility as a mental health advocate that people are hurting that much. But I also think what's unique about law enforcement, particularly CPD, in terms of our rates of suicide and hopelessness, is the disconnect between that and mental illness. That what I experience and what you have heard too, and you talking with people in focus groups and just us being a part of this community, is the ability to handle what they see on a day-to-day basis. They feel pretty confident about that there's a tremendous amount of resiliency. I think that it's around the changing nature of this job, transparency, feeling supported, feeling safe in terms of media, pressure, et cetera. And I think that is something that is attainable in terms of getting a handle on, but something that we really want to dig into in terms of how is that interfering with mental health issues. And because it's not as obvious, I think that it's harder to acknowledge how much it's tearing people down.
Yeah, and from a kind of a national perspective, suicides are at all-time highs.
All-time high.
For almost every category, young people, adults, various professions are all experiencing this high level of anxiety, high level of depression. So let's talk about, what is suicide mental health? Is there a difference between a case of attempt suicide or suicide and mental health?
When you feel like that alone and that hopeless, and when your feedback is that you are not worthwhile, it's better if you're not around. When that's the narrative that you're hearing, which is a lie, it's often symptoms of depression, anxiety, for sure. I used to say that the most tragic outcome of depression is suicide. The most tragic outcome of mental illness is suicide. But we're also seeing people who have really traumatic home lives, financial issues, history in their families. All of that plays a role. And I think that you're absolutely right when we talk about that this is pervasive now with every skin color and every age group. And to me, what that tells me is there is some real unsteadiness going on and some disconnection and a lack of hope that is not being met with a real initiative and strategy nationally around this. And we have to change that because we have used the lens of mental illness so much with suicide. And I think it has to change.
So the impact of a global pandemic has isolated us more. We've had to social distance. We've had to isolate. We had to stay at home.
Right.
Our kids hadn't been able to go to school.
Right.
We haven't been able to interact in large crowds,
Right.
sporting events, entertainment, theaters, all the distractions that we would have the more normalcy to life has changed for what is now 12 months. or more.
Oh my God, right?
And the levels of anxiety, depression is where I want to really dig down deep and
Yeah.
have a conversation about that. So anxiety, depression does not equal suicide, because people who suffer from anxiety and
That's
depression
right.
that never consider suicide. So
Right.
what's that line that's crossed between someone who is isolated, suffering from anxiety and depression because of it, that they've never experienced before, and that line people cross that commit suicide?
Hopelessness, access to a firearm, substance use. Even this idea of disconnection is so significant. We're both duly vaccinated and have been for several weeks, so we can finally sit here together without our masks on, which is, I think, the first time since I've known you.
Yeah.
That feels more connected to me, even that, right? It feels more normal to me. So think about every single instance in people's lives where they're feeling disconnected and they don't know when it's going to end. So that hopelessness plays a huge role. And then that constant worry, that feeling out of control, that feeling like I can't grasp it, and that feeling of this is so hard. What we have to remember is this is a moment. And there are a lot of individuals managing for the first time high levels of anxiety and depression who don't go to that dark place. But there are many people who do. High levels of people, young people, think about on a daily basis, would it be different if I wasn't here? And I think that the message needs to be really strong that this feels like it's never going to change. This feels like you can't get better. But people recover all the time. People who've had dark thoughts, who've made attempts, are living today to say, I am so glad I'm still here. And those are the people that have to come out and talk about it, because that is what reduces that feeling of I'm alone. If you're saying that in this global pandemic, we are seeing higher rates of anxiety and depression, what that should be communicating to your listeners here is the person next to you is feeling the same way.
Right.
Right? Let's have that conversation and talk about it. And that in of itself is a connection activity. Our quality of our relationships, the quality of our workforce directly dictates the quality of our lives. What do we need to do to reshape that? And the responsibility of you is to bring on a really strategic plan around officer wellness, which is what you're doing.
Let's shift gears.
Yeah.
The police profession has refused to talk about this issue of mental health, of suicides. And we have suffered in silence for so long, not just Chicago PD, but I'm here in Chicago, so Chicago PD is front of mind for me in this issue. How do we just remove the stigma of, number one, it's going to affect my job. I'm going to lose my card to carry a firearm, and I'm going to get fired, number one. The stigma of I'm going to be seen as weak if I talk about this as a police officer, that I've got to be strong. I've got to be able to face danger, so I can't show signs of weakness.
Yeah.
And which leads to me not talking to a peer or a professional about my struggles.
Yeah, I think that it's just myth busting. And it's starting like at the recruit level, normalizing this idea of mental health, and also at the same time building those tools of resilience, because having access to a mental health provider is available here. There's resources. They are thin and they are working hard, and the referrals are through the roof. We just analyzed data and we saw you're seeing these spikes around this time of people who are engaging in help-seeking behaviors. But it is a strength to acknowledge I need to work on something. And it is also a strength to say, I may feel okay right now, but I want to know how to get there, what the referral, what the intake looks like, who feels good to me, so that I can support myself and my family. I think it's also reframing the conversation of we are not going to be well, we are not going to be able to do this job if we aren't well. And when COVID hit, for example, at NAMI, we thought, how are we going to first identify the needs of my team to make sure that they are okay? Because we don't have the luxury of not serving our community, particularly during this time.
That's right.
And the men and women that work for you are committed to supporting this city. And they need all the tools to do so. And so identifying that, help seeking is normal. It needs to happen at every level. And I think it's really important that leadership comes out and talks about it too, right? Like, this is what I've done. And you hear that more and more. Whispers, like, well, I saw somebody at the EAP. Don't whisper it, because I'm hearing that from everybody, you know?
Right. So what are some of the precursors to getting to that point of hopelessness and considering suicide? Is there some signs that are prominent across all demographics and socioeconomic levels? Are there some things that we need to look for as loved ones and friends of people in this profession? Yeah,
right. Good point, because we need to lean in harder. Yes and no. Think about all of the times that we have lost people where their closest community is like, we had no idea.
Yep.
Yeah?
I've heard that a lot recently.
All the time. So certainly there are signs to look for, and we've seen it, with our own work. Individuals who may be experiencing really low levels of depression, despair, and then all of a sudden it flips, and they feel more steady and more content. Often that demonstrates that they made a decision. Giving away possessions, making plans, excessive drinking, isolation, secretive behavior, more impulsive behavior. All of those things can be a lot of symptoms of a lot of things, but can also be characteristics. And then we know, again, that how do you have that conversation is really overwhelming. Because we are like, I don't want to put that in their mind. If they're not thinking it, I don't want to bring it up. And that in of itself is a myth. The more that we can talk about it and say, how are you feeling? Do you feel like tomorrow's going to be a better day? Do you feel like when you wake up in the morning, you want to show up today? Those are the questions that we ask. And when you do have the responsibility of asking those questions as a supervisor or as a peer, you have to be fluent and know what resources are available and are trusted within the department. And the EAP is one of those resources.
As I mentioned before, we've had here in Chicago PD 3 in the last 11 months that I've been on the job as superintendent. And this idea that suicides come in clusters, that one can kind of bring on multiple suicides. How do we stop clusters from happening? Is that a real thing? Is clustering of suicides a real thing? And if it is, how do we stop it?
We've definitely seen that in all different type of demographics. I think it demonstrates some type of permission. I think we stop it by just saturating and pressing the pause button. What is the most important thing right now to do in this department? And it's support and rest and demonstration of resources that are available. And then that can't go away. Yeah, it needs to continue all the time, right? So continuing to show up, continuing to lean in, pay special attention, and just identify folks who may feel really isolated. There's individuals who are surrounded all the time. They have a strong unit, they're good guys, they're all really close friends, and then there's other people who don't have that type of connection, maybe in district or in different areas. So furlough is very lonely for them.
So saying take some time off may not be the most helpful thing.
But if somebody says I need some time off, great, but who's then checking in with them too? Because people do need to be rested. We know that when we are not rested, we don't think critically. And we think impulsively. And as my pediatrician said to me when I had a newborn who didn't sleep for a year, he's like, it's like you're drunk driving. You're just not thinking thoroughly.
Right.
So making sure that people have access to time off, but when they do, who's looking after them?
So one of the things that I'm cognizant of as a leader of a large police organization is what to do and what not to do. So I don't want to become a professional mental health specialist, and I know I'm not. I want to lean on those people who have that subject matter expertise. So what would you give me guidance on of the things to do?
People want to see your face.
Yep.
They want to know that you care. They want you to be in front of them and tell them what you're going to do around this, right? I think that's it. I think people want to see their leader show up.
Yep.
And the more that you have the capacity to do that among your 800 other things that you're doing to keep our city safe every day, I think that means a lot. And I know that that's what you want to do.
Sure. And what are some don'ts? What would you recommend of the things that you need to do to be more present, roll calls, just showing up?
Yeah.
What are some things that I should stay away from doing?
I think that what we don't want to do is disrupt anything more than it feels like it is right now, right? That there is some real big gaps and cracks right now with the recent tragedies.
Yep.
And so what can we do to stabilize? And what are we thinking about? As a leader, I always think about what's the collateral damage that I think a good idea brings, and there's been many of them. And so weighing that, I think, and hearing from, like you are doing, from the people on the ground about how it could impact them different than maybe their bosses.
Yeah, so a particular work unit, for example, who's a member committed suicide, and they're all grieving much more than people that maybe are 2 or 3 relationships removed from that person. They're really grieving. So the reason I asked whether the do's or don'ts is, do we just return to normal as if nothing happened?
Right.
Do we just say get back to work? Do we keep you busier?
Yeah.
To distract?
Yeah.
What are some of the things for those
such a
particular
good
work
question.
groups
Yes.
that I should do and not do?
You know what? It's so interesting. So this is new. This culture is newer for me to work within.
Right.
And you all do think of each other as groups, but remember that as a group, that they work and they move in the same way, but they're individual, and everybody manages stress differently.
Yeah.
So that's the individual responsibility of their leadership to say, what do you need when you're overwhelmed? What do you need? And some people are like, I need a day where nobody's talking to me, and somebody else is like, put me to work and put me on,
Keep me busy.
overtime.
Yep.
So I think it's asking and providing that personal choice.
Right. So
Yeah.
individualizing
Exactly.
how we treat people.
Right.
Don't
And-
treat them as a
right.
group as
Right.
much.
Individual. And I think that that's one of the recommendations we've always made. Upon hiring, or when you are detailed somewhere else, or when you have a new supervisor, one of the first conversations is, how do you deal with stress? And they may be like, I don't know yet. Like, recruits may not know yet, for example. Well, I like to do this, or I don't want anybody talking to me, or I only want to talk to my wife. Those things are really important so that when unfortunate things happen, that sergeant can lean in and say, I know that you talk to your wife and you're feeling stressful, and she's saying you're not talking to her. What's going on? Right? So we have more data to use to support them.
Right. So we have peers, we have professional clinicians. Now we have you on board, Alexa. Can you just talk about briefly, and I can go through some of it, some of the things we're doing as a mitigation strategy to make sure officers are well, given the recent 2 suicides that we've had in the last 7 days. One, our clinicians are making roll calls.
Right.
All of the roll calls, and starting with those work units,
Right.
but expanding out. Number 2, they're providing several different programs. The comfort pets, the dogs are very popular. Yoga actually is very popular,
we're doing- we
particularly
did
with
some
our
of that
younger
today in 10.
officers. Yes. What are some other things that we're
Yeah.
doing specifically for these recent tragedies
Right.
in our department?
The chaplains
Yes.
is amazing. They're out there all the time. I don't think they sleep either. There's peer support. There's also substance abuse counselors, substance use counselors that go out and also participate in roll call training. You know, that power of peer is really important. So to know that a sworn officer, a gun-carrying person who is also has this clinical knowledge and can have these conversations with you is really powerful. My team, NAMI Chicago, is also showing up on the back end of the EAP's initial debriefings. And clinicians, too, are in district as well. I think we need more of that, certainly, and that's what they're hungry for. There's also opportunity for people to link to external services, too. So there's referrals given, support groups. Sergeants are going through training, and lieutenants and commanders, so that they understand better how to have conversations with people who are having a hard time. And I think that there is some individualized support going on. You know, I've heard amazing leadership stories from people saying, take the day, be a part of the procession, what do you need? So there's a lot of love here and kinship, and how do we elevate that so people really feel it all the time?
So I want to close with this conversation. You know, we always hear we haven't done enough in this area of officer suicide and officer wellness, and we are committed to doing more, but what it feels like is we do more when there's a crisis and then we stop.
That's right.
How do we encourage people to understand we're never going to stop as promoting officer wellness as a prominent feature of our strategic plan to keep the city of Chicago safe? Officer wellness is part of keeping the city of Chicago safe.
Right.
That's the direct connection. Officers that are not well cannot do their job.
Right.
Which means they can't keep the city safe.
Right. No, that's such a good question. I'll answer with twofold. One is we have to make sure that we're thinking about physical wellness and movement, and that they have the opportunity to do that every day. So hopefully the gyms and districts will open soon, and that we're providing more of that. The other thing is the traumatic incident stress management new policy that came out is providing a much broader reach for people to give referrals to the AP. It's not just discharging your firearm. It's also, have you experienced something that is traumatizing to you? It's really highlighting this importance of personalization. And so there becomes this loop. I think once people buy into this, they're hooked. But we also have to think about what else works for you and tell us so that we can make sure that's a part of the ongoing process. People show up more visually when there is a crisis, and we're going to do more to make sure that we're there visually, just to check in and tell people they're valued.
Thank you so much, Alexa. I'm sure we could talk all day about this. We have to get this out to our internal message platform so officers can hear this conversation we just had and get it out to as many people around the city as well, but more work to do. And thank you so much for taking this on as part of your journey. We really appreciate it. You're going to save lives, Alexa. You are. I feel it. You're going to save lives here. Thank you.
Thank you.